Hey, good to see you all today. This is Wednesday, May 29th, almost halfway through the year. We're getting closer and closer into the second quarter. I hope
Seriously.
many of you are, I hope many of you are appreciating what the second quarter has brought you. Hopefully it's been very good. Hey, Terry, good to see your face. This
Hello.
second quarter seems to have warmed up a little bit. When we tell the story in a few weeks, a month from now, we're going to see if we're actually looking at a normal pattern, like it was just a slow winter, a busy spring, and going to be a busy summer, or if we're looking at some weird 2023-ish kind of pattern. So looking forward to kind of analyzing that with you and seeing how it's going. I'm sure many of you are feeling pushes and pulls from clients on projects. Many of you I know are still kind of experiencing this um, odd win rate, where you're doing a lot more pitches and not winning them, or whatever that ghosting thing is. Somebody told me again today they might as well just like pull the plug, put the plugs in their ears because that client never responded after they did a bid for somebody. So very strange behavior going on out there. And if you've been listening to me for the last few weeks, you know that I have some theories of what this economy is doing to some of the larger brands and corporations, what that means inside of the departments, downsizing. And these are humans trying to balance a lot of things. And so we're going to get bad, odd human behavior from humans. But there are certain people that are booming. So we're going to see and probably talk about that a little bit. Okay, before we go too far, I do want to share with you something. We're going to launch in just a few weeks an accelerator, and the accelerator we're going to launch is actually going to deal with one of the topics we're going to deal with in the accelerator is a topic we're dealing with today, which is knowing your price. The accelerator we're going to launch is called Foundations. The Foundations Accelerator is exactly this. If you have a small studio, maybe $1.5 million or less, you haven't really been able to build out your production pipeline, your production team. You don't understand how finances connect together. Jason and I are working with a client right now. They are multi-millions of dollars and don't have these foundations in place. So we know that these are kind of big asks for small companies, but there are basic practices you can do. And I want to talk about this thing: entrepreneurship, production, dealing with the future, creative, and adding your creative and marketing together. So you're getting that big push, getting the word out. Qualifying leads. This is really, really, really huge. Many of us just say yes to everything. We're not really doing the work to find the leads that are right for you to begin with and then landing them. But this one right here, know your price, is such a big one that we have to get right. I know so many companies that are busy, and then at the end of the year, they have nothing to show for it because they didn't charge the right amount. They weren't clear on what their expenses were, their costs were in relationship to the price they're giving the client. And we want to know that stuff. So this foundations class is launching, launch in late June. It's available right now. If you're interested, please feel free to sign up. If you don't know yet, you can always schedule a call with me. I'm happy to jump on, talk to you for half hour, tell you what it's about, make sure it's the right fit for you. But just want you to know that's happening. And some of the reason I'm having this conversation today is we've been wrapping my mind around it, specifically because a lot of the smaller studios have been asking this question. I think that as we grow and as the margins are shrinking that the clients are giving us, we have to fit more into the box that we've been given. That technology push that's been happening out there is allowing us to create some efficiencies, but the overall bite of the apple, the clients are giving us a smaller apple to take a bite out of, and the staff that we have might be too expensive at the rates that we're charging or the prices that we're giving the client. So I want to talk about that today because I think that's a big hit that's often invisible, and people don't know how to wrap their mind around what that problem is and how to solve that problem. I'm going to show you one of the tools that we often work with clients. It's called a production roll-up. Production roll-ups are exactly that. It's just a list of projects that you have in-house. It tells you the price that you've charged that client. If you know the splits, you can see the splits on this roll-up. If you don't know the splits, there are videos about this all over community. Just dive in there, look, just search for the weekly briefing, talk about the splits. I'll tell you how the direct and indirect splits work. And some of the faces I see here right now have been using the splits for decades, so I know you guys know about it. But specifically, I want to draw your attention here to this profit margin. See this down here? This is somewhat realistic of what. No, these are Captain Crunch and Five Guys. These are all kind of somewhat padded and make believe. But I wanted to show you a pattern I've been seeing a lot from studios I'm working with, and it's this right here. See this red? For some reason, in the last 6-8 months, these projects have been creeping in, and more of them are turning out to be in the red column. As we dive into companies and fix their rates, the rate fixing makes it even worse. So because they weren't charging enough, and when we right sized the price, the rates that they should be charging the client based off of the costs for the talent, turns out they weren't charging enough. And there's overspending, a very invisible thing, overspending in the cost column and making this profit go down. So seeing this repeatedly, Jason, you're the one who pointed out to me originally a few weeks ago that we're seeing this on clients that we've worked with for years, that there's something that's creeped in kind of in the back door in a way. And we had to right size it. We've been taking out this staff cost calculator for the last few weeks and really kind of working our way through it. At RevThink, it's one of the things we do with our clients at least twice a year. We look at the factors report, we look at the splits, we ask the question where the money's going, what is our revenue? Do we have the right size expenses to match the revenue that we're actually generating? And then can we guarantee profits? Can we adjust our understanding of spending so that we don't overspend on projects? So we often do this once a year at the beginning of the year, but have to adjust as the quarters reveal themselves. And it seems like quarter 2, 2024 is one we're going to probably be diving in and looking at this a lot. Okay, so that's the setup. Before I go on, anybody have any questions or thoughts about that? Are you feeling the same kind of pain and that same kind of squeeze from your clients and having to deliver more, or trying to figure out how to keep everyone busy while the projects are slowly rolling in? Is that just shake your head if you're kind of feeling that? So here's where we often go. I'm not going to dive into the factors report, which defines the splits, what portion of the revenue you have to spend on your indirect costs, your overhead items, and what is allocated to direct costs, which allows you to spend a piece of that revenue on projects. I'm not going to get into that because I've done that before, and I'll probably have to do it again soon. I want to jump to, how do I know what the price is I should be charging in those rates? And the first place that we go when we're looking at that is really a staff list. We start right here. Let me kind of hide this for a second so it doesn't distract us too much. I start right here and I just take the list of people that we have at the company and their gross compensation. Now, this gross compensation has other things built into it. We have to fully load this compensation. So what we add to someone's base salary pay are things like our insurances, our employee taxes, any other benefits we have. So when we add it all together, Posh is making actually 180. She might be taking home or have a $150,000 salary or $170,000 salary, but it really costs the company 180. So that's the first thing we want to do. We want to fully load this understanding of compensation. And then what we do is we take that fully loaded piece and we divide it. I'm going to make this 100% so you can see how the math really works here. So at 180 dollars a year that costs us, we need to divide this number by the number of working days that are in a year. So the number of working days, standard in the US is 251 working days. Many of us take off different holidays. So we actually kind of often reference this calendar tool, which you can kind of look through, find the holidays you want to take. And as you choose days off, this little calendar system will tell us how many total working days that you've determined for your company. So that's how we get to this 251, as we might look at and customize the number of work days. If in addition to the number of working days you have at a company, you have 15 PTO days, that's sick days, holidays, vacation policy days, whatever that is, your actual total working days is 236, because there's 251 plus that person's taking an additional 15 days off, so 236. So if I'm taking this $180,000 a year and dividing it by 236, I'm getting around $800,000 a year. And if I'll show you why it's round, this calculation we have here actually just says that 801 days per year, rounded, it's 800. So now I have a cost for each day that person works. So this Posh, the director, is costing me $800 a day for every day that she's working on a project. The next thing we talk about when it comes to that, and we do that for each team member, is what percentage of those days is that person busy? So you can think of it in an 8-hour day. How many days are they really working on projects? Or in a 5-day work week, how many total hours are they working on projects? Something like that. But 100% is unusual. Some people do work 110% of an 8-hour workday. So that could go above that. But often the number we use is 80 to 85%, just so we have a rounded number as a base. When it comes to Sporty, she's an EP, so she's actually going to work fewer days or fewer hours per day on a specific project. So in Sporty's case, she might actually be around 65%. And I can calculate this number based off of a timesheet if I want to, or I can take a standard schedule for a 40-day week and kind of estimate what that is. But I'm trying to get a sense of like, what is this person's actual cost to me? So for every hour that they bill on a project, what does that hour cost me? Because those hours, the money to pay them comes from the project. So the hours they put on the projects, the ones that they are actually working, I have to assign their total rate to it. And that's how I'm getting this cost per day for each person. If I divide that by 8, I'm going to get this by $150 an hour. And that's step number 1, cost per hour, cost per day. And this is more realistic. Now, I have a feeling many of you you don't even get down to this detail. So while you might be looking at losses down this column here, or on your cash flow, not knowing where your money is going, could be because you're spending money and you haven't put the right cost against the project. So in this right cost to date category or cost remaining category, if you don't have the right number in there, you're estimating short. You're estimating more profitable than you really are, and you're surprised that there isn't any money. I try to be very realistic. I try to be very transparent, and I want to really put this number against those hours. And I'm sure you're going to ask me, because I'll have an open mic here in a second. You know, that's a pretty high cost. That's a lot, and the client's not going to pay that amount. So we're going to talk about that next, is this price per day. But I just want to stop right here just for a moment. I talked really fast. I talked to a couple of things. I want to get a sense of anybody doing this right now. Anybody have anything that works this way, or any sense of what this might mean to you or might not mean to you? Questions, comments? Feel free to throw it out there. Andrew's always good for a comment. What do you got, Andrew?
I mean, we're doing some of this, but then there's like a final step where we kind of canvas the area and see if the rate we've come up with actually makes any sense at all. And then if it doesn't, we have to figure out, what do we do?
Yeah,
a lot of last question. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is how we decide to hire somebody or make them a freelance or make it a freelance thing that we need.
It's one of the first kind of insights you can gain when you actually put the real cost that person, and you realize what the client's willing to pay. You might find that your company is wrong sized. You might be heavily loaded with high priced people that you super love, and they're really efficient and they make your life easy, but you're totally overspending on them. And the way to solve that problem is, right, to cut back that cost or generate more revenue, right? That way you can actually afford them. But there is kind of some tipping points, especially if your company is growing or the economy is shrinking, that those steps have to be carefully measured to make sure you're doing it right. Anyone else? Yeah, what do you got, Will?
So we do something like that. Every year we set out on 2 sides, both the budget for workers and then the budget for our company. We use Harvest to track time, and then every quarter we're supposed to. We haven't done it this year. We should. We've been dealing with a bunch, but we'll look at the time actually spent on those particular projects, and it's a little bit off if we're thinking about hiring someone like a freelancer or someone outside, just because we might be faster than those people. So we have to kind of compensate a little bit for how fast we are versus how fast someone else is. But we're using historical data rather than saying like,
Yeah.
some percentage. But yeah,
I do the
this is
same
very
thing.
similar.
I use historical data when I'm first building this thing. I want to get a sense of like, where did your money go?
Right.
That's the first thing I want to analyze so that we're all kind of know we're measuring the right piece. But more important than looking forensically at the past to determine what the future is going to be. You know me, I kind of want to say like, yeah, but where do I want it to go? Or where do I need it to go? If the economy is shrinking, regardless of how good it was in 2022, I need to totally pivot to the reality of 2024 and say, wow, I have to think differently about this. And I'm not saying everyone has to adjust their salary, but you might be realizing that utilization number, for example, has to change, or how I charge my clients for underutilized people. I might pitch something differently or bid something differently, or assign more than one role to the same individual. I might assign the associate producer and the producer to the same individual, the assistant editor and the editor to the same individual, so that on my bid, when I'm giving it to the client, that person has more utilization, that both things are being accounted for, instead of just the editorial piece and then giving the rest, the archiving and the digitizing and the moving, giving that away for free. No, I might need to discover tasks that we're doing that are currently not being captured and put against that project. We often don't like those tasks because the first ones we get rid of when we're trying to shrink our budget. But if they're real and it's going to change that cost, or it's going to be a real cost against that project, you're basically giving away money. And there's no reason to. There's no reason to support the corporations that are paying you to do the work. You can right size your bid and your budgets to what they're giving. Often utilization, I'll say like 15 years ago, when I was putting these pieces together, the word utilization was like taboo. I used to really, really think it's the wrong way to think of it, because I like to say we're a prima donna industry. It's based off the person's talent and creativity. There's a total value base to them. So if I could work 3 hours, I could be really underutilized when it comes to number of hours, but create huge value. Why would I argue with that, right? And I actually worked with a couple of folks that were exactly dealing with that. What they had was like a colorist, and what that colorist might be making $130 a year, and they might be working 40% of their time on projects. So we created this column over here, estimated revenue, to say, yeah, but if at 40% of this person's time, Justin's time, and we were looking at the estimated revenue and it was like $1.2 million, we're like, go for it. Underutilized all the way. Our margins are greater than what the estimated revenue should be for that person. I definitely want to kind of recognize the value proposition. So that's when I started recognizing utilization is good for calculation still, especially when it comes to understanding what these cost rates need to be, and make sure that we're keeping our expenses of a project in relationship to the revenue. But more looking like what is the value proposition? Because many of us want to talk about value, but we didn't have a real way of recognizing it. And if you can assign a projected revenue and know that person's beating it, don't get rid of them. Like the utilization might be wrong or low, but like, you don't get rid of them. You just know that that's your magic and it's shifted somewhere else. So we want to be very careful about that. Okay, I'm going to show you this last piece here, because this is where we translate to price per day. So if you know RevThink, what we use is the term cost of things that cost us, and price is the price we give our client. So this is what our client should be paying us for that individual. Let's look at Posh again. So in Posh's case, at 80% utilization, her cost per day is $1,000 a day. But you'll see that the company splits are 50-50. What that means is at 100% of the revenue that Posh earns, so if she were to bill out at $2,000 a day, 50% of that money is available to spend on the creative, and 50% money goes to the company. So what that means is at $2,000, half of the money is available at $1,000 a day to cover her cost on a project. And the other $1,000 goes to our indirect costs, these other expenses we have at the company. And when I looked at my company's total revenue, cost that I have to run the business indirectly related to projects, and what's available or needs to be available to run a project, I understood it's 50-50. And therefore I know that her rate has to be 2,000 in order to cover the 1,000 she actually costs. So this price per day is the beginning of a conversation of what we should be putting out there on our bids for our clients. Now, many of you, as I said before, are probably facing something of like, yeah, but $3,000 a day is a lot for this colorist. Or maybe not. Maybe this colorist, well, I'm going to put colorist here because that was the example I was giving. This colorist might be making $5,000 a day. I only have to make $3,000 a day in revenue to have that person break even. Awesome. That's like, again, a winning category. So how can we get to these numbers in order to keep up with our clients? I'll say one of the things you have to recognize is if you're looking at numbers there in the price category that you can't charge, that's the problem you need to solve. There's many ways of doing it, but at least you're recognizing, wait a second, this cost and the revenue I'm generating, because the clients are pulling back or shrinking it, I can't keep up with it. And my utilization is going down. So my costs are going up by the day or by the hour. Whoa, something is off here. And we have to start thinking about how to justify expenses on projects, how to utilize people differently, how to understand their value proposition so that we present them properly on a bid, or get rid of that bid form that you have that gives line by line breakdown and start giving flat rate bids to your clients. So you're giving a price per category, one price for live action, one price for post, and so on. There's other ways of presenting even, so you don't have to justify it on a line by line basis. Some of our clients have cost controllers in there. In the case of cost controllers, and you're thinking value-based, again, I think, Colin, I think it was you, of the idea of saying like, yeah, but we're more efficient than a normal person. So if what usually takes somebody a day and a half only takes me a day, when I do my cost controlling analysis, I need to be looking at it as if that person was spread over a day and a half, even though they only takes them 24 or 8 hours to do it. And that efficiency is yours to be kept. So if you have a faster way of doing it, a more efficient way of doing it, the competition, and that helps you adjust that rate down so that you can basically make, charge $1,200, or in Pasha's case, $2,000, but on your bid, it says a day and a half, and internally it's only a day because of the efficiency. That's where another way you gain. Some people hear me saying something wrong, which is pad the days in order to make it work. And in a way, I am saying it. What I'm really saying, though, is if you have a more efficient way of doing it, that's your profit. That's your ingenuity. That's your efficiency. That's what you got into entrepreneurial businesses for, is to find those efficiencies. And those are for yours to be kept. So think of what you should be charging in that bid is more like a book rate, a standard time rate. If you were to hire that as a freelancer, what would you estimate that freelancer's time to be? That's what you put on that bid form. And then using your staff person, more efficient. Awesome. We can capture the wins there. So there are adjustable items there. I just wanted to point out really where and how to recognize where the issues are, and then be able to break down that problem into different ways would work for you and your clients in your presentation, which there's probably as many ways of doing it as people that I have their camera on right now. Who would have a situation where like you might find it tricky to write or create a bid with the numbers I'm putting out there for Posh? $2,000 a day for somebody. Jason, you have an example?
No, I thought you said who would have a problem doing that or a challenge doing that. I was like, yeah, I would.
Yeah. Well, let's just ask this. How many of you are not charging enough for yourself? How many of you know that you should be asking for a lot more? And then but you go like, well, whatever, I'm in overhead. I'll take the profit when it's left over. And you're not putting enough just for your own self out there. Yeah, right. And why is that, Ed? Do you have a sense of why we do that to ourselves first?
I do, and I wouldn't even say quite as much of that, but I mean, like, it's one thing that you can control as like it's a variable that's easier to like, I can adapt to this and not have to change something else. I think the weirdest thing that I've seen recently is like just very, very different allocated budgets across like similar verticals or horizontals for different, like one company might pay like literally one company might pay like $120,000 for a 15-second social ad, and another one might want it for 5,000.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And both are within the same, like one might even to 5,000 might be like a massive network, and the other one might be a small business or relatively small business. So I think like the disparity is the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now of like what
Yeah.
how our expertise is valuable to different aspects of different parts of the industry.
Yeah. Well said. And some people are valuing it on how fast it's going to disappear into ether. Like it'll only last 3 seconds. Why are I paying $120,000 for it? If I'm lucky, 3 seconds. Sometimes it's going to be a second and a half that the person's going to see it. Instead of the work that you're doing or the value it brings, it's just like, on someone's social media feed, and they have to make more of them. Maybe they have to make 25 in order to get to the full impression, opposed to make one 30-second commercial. Yeah. Yeah, that is hard to navigate when you're trying to find that price. It can very, very much squeeze you. And how do you deal with that? Do you bundle things together? Do you work with the client, or do you just turn down the project? How are you dealing with that?
I mean, that mostly depends upon like, we've literally had that exact thing without names, but it's like the $5,000 one was like something where we want to build the relationship. So it was very much the bid is like, this is the cost. Like, yes, we've been pursuing you for a while. Like, we can make this happen. Ideally, here's what it's going to cost you in the future. They all acknowledge that. If that turns anything, probably not,
Yeah.
because you've kind of already set what you're willing to do, but at least they came to us with like the idea of like, hey, this kind of sucks, but we would like to work with you. So
Yeah, that's right. You have to know how to navigate the future you in that relationship before you take that risk, don't you? Yeah. Terry's bringing up the idea of like a lot of clients give us the flat bid, like we're kind of stuck with the number they give us, which might be good news when you're looking at some of this. Hey, they're not giving us a breakdown of item by item, so a $2,000 person isn't the issue. It's when I add up all the pieces, it's greater than the budget that they propose to us. In that case, right, where idea of qualifying that lead again or qualifying that client, is this the right kind of client? Is it the right kind of project? Or do I have to qualify my team? Do I have too big of people? Do I have too many of them waiting around, underutilized? So I'm throwing extra people on my project just to keep them busy. The flat bid thing is never going to go away. It's always going to be part of it. And to me, I think that's where like necessity is the mother of innovation, where those things should help us dive in deeper and find those efficiencies that we need, not only to survive in one moment, but actually capture some wins in the other categories, like finding a more efficient person, a more talented or faster editor, someone who makes decisions sooner, or a producer that can get projects delivered, on time more often than not. Those are the kind of talent that we're looking for to when the squeeze happens to those projects. Jared, is that you in? Yeah, sorry. I'm jumping here. Is there a break? This is Joe. Is there a breakdown for how you arrive at 50% allocation for the company? Yeah, there is, Joe. We call that the term that I came up with is this idea of the factors. It's actually Terry Lee's on this call right here. It's Terry's company, Roger, that I invented this thing 15 years ago, whatever it was. And the thought was this: the overall term is the factors that influence profits, or in other ways, like where did my money go that I don't get to keep it? And when I start realizing the funds flow, you recognize that you have a set cost or static cost for a company. That's the rent, often the owner's salary, some insurances, and those items. They're not very pliable. They're kind of static for you. And then you have these dynamic costs, which are people, how many people you have, how many people on the project, and so on. So if your static costs equal about $500,000 in a year, and you're projecting revenue of $1 million, all of a sudden you realize half of your money, 50% of your money has to go to cover those company costs. So what we do in like a profit first method is we take that $1 million in revenue and we take out our overhead percentage first. So we remove that indirect cost first, and whatever's left over, that's what we use to produce the project. Because that human factor is dynamic. I can assign people at different rates, at different times, different speeds to make it fit. And that's often where your producers are a genius. It's often where you're focusing, because on a day-by-day basis, you're delivering projects. You have a lot of resource management or a lot of resources available using freelancers or staff. So there's a lot of pieces you can move around to make that fit, where you can't really, on a project-by-project basis, cut back your rent or, you know, or your kids' college tuition. So your take-home pay can't be flexible that way. So that's why we split that, so we can see where the decision points are, what percentage is available to do it, and then we ask our production team, hey, work with us, make everything fit within that, whatever is left. We see people spread out all over the place. Some people are spending 70% on the project costs, only 30% in overhead, and others the total opposite. Some people could, you know, have 30% overhead, 30% on costs, and 30% left in profit. So there's a lot of opportunity when you start thinking that way to break that stuff down. But that's what we're doing in the factors method. And I skipped ahead today on that because I was talking about the rate stuff, but that's one of the things we look at often. And like I said, you can look at in community, you can find videos that we kind of dive more deep into those issues. Andrew, do you want to jump in and ask this question?
I was just curious what everybody else does when you do like so just from bad experiences, like when we do decide to do something where we're like, okay, well, this is how much our cost should be. This is how much this client is saying they are willing to pay, but we want this relationship. I've come to the conclusion that we always note the discount required to get to that price on like throughout our entire contractual process, because too often I've done the favor and I get handed the paper back and said, well, this is what you charged last time. Why is it not that? So like I try to make sure that the discount is cataloged all the way through the process. But I'm curious if anybody else is doing that and if that's the right thing to be doing.
Yeah. I know that people are doing that. I don't know if they're on this call. What I'll just point out what you're actually doing is and which is really, really smart. You're actually navigating that future conversation today, right? You're setting yourself up to win that future argument by documenting it. And in your case, you feel very comfortable if the client came back to you with that you know how to navigate through that future argument. So you've set it up to make that a win. That's very smart. It's good to know your strength. It's good to know your position. It's good to know how you're going to kind of work through that process. Not everyone feels comfortable that way or tracks it that same way, but that's what we have to do if we're going to get into a position where we're making a decision to do a project that isn't right-sized. We have to know why we're doing it, and we have to know where we're going to win later on. I think too many people compromise thinking, well, it keeps people busy, which sometimes it feels very right. Like if everyone's sitting around and I just need that 30 grand, I'll take it, even though it's a total bummer of a project. You can have some long-term consequences when you're taking that smaller bite of the apple. Yeah. This is really good questions. I'm hoping that helps a little bit just with some of there. But what I wanted to point out most is like these invisible costs that pop up, like areas that if we don't have the right tool, we basically know what's on our bid is a total guess. Or we've assumed something like, well, the market rate is X amount of dollars for this person. I guess I just lose on some and gain on others. And overall, like I level myself out. Those are what we often do when we don't have the tools in place to measure it accurately. My technique is to say, measure everything accurately, know exactly the decisions you're going to make, and then find those problems with accurate analysis and then fix that problem. And that problem might be, like we said, padding things, cutting things, sometimes discounting whatever it is. But if it's measurable, then you know what you have to fill in later on. It's the hidden debt that will wipe us out of business. And it's if that stuff, in a bad season, that bad debt, that hidden debt kind of clicks on us faster and it doesn't go away because there's no revenue to push it on to the next project. And we're stuck. And when you're stuck holding the hot potato, man, like you're done, right? That's a kid that's kicked out of the game. So we got to be very careful if we're not measuring this properly. It's kind of honestly, just luck or gambling that gets us through. I don't want any of you to feel that way. There are easy ways to kind of work your way through once you know what the answer is. Yeah, Will?
I just had a question about, I don't know how big you guys are. We're just two people. We hire a lot of freelancers. Is there some spreadsheet, other tool that you have for that kind of calculation? Because it seems like here we're talking about employees working, which we do for ourselves, but not for freelancers, because freelancers' prices are going up as well.
Yeah, basically what our calculator does is turn that staff person into, like, we're calculating them to compare them to a freelancer. So if I know what Posh's day rate is, and then I can look at a freelancer day rate, and the day rate for the freelancer is cheaper, I know Posh is going to work on the project. I have to bring in this freelancer. And eventually Posh is out of a job because their utilization drops so much because the freelancer is less expensive and can get the same job done at the same time. What your hope is, if Posh is more expensive, that the freelancer takes twice as many hours. The rate might be less, but my overall cost, have that freelancer, the total cost is the same or more. So that's what I want to, that's why I have a staff person for those efficiencies. I can break up their hours and their time differently than a freelancer. The overall goal, though, is to really looking at those expenses and know for certain what you need to be charging that client. And to some degree, the hardest, and I'm very sorry about this, the hardest is to walk away from a project because it doesn't work. You're going to be financing someone else and you have to go find the next project. I want you to disqualify a project as soon as possible. That way you let go of it sooner and find the replacement sooner than holding on to it, and hoping it changes, and waste 2 more weeks and then stuck because you didn't look for anything else in that 2-week time. So to me, it's fail fast when it comes to that qualification. So I want these tools to be easy, accessible, look at them, and then start making critical decisions as fast as possible so you can move on or bring that project in-house. Some days I feel like I'm preaching. Yeah, Remy, what's up with you? Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, just following on from Will's question about when it was just the two of you using freelancers. We were in a situation before where we had a very small team and using loads of freelancers. And then by the end of the year, we looked at the amount of money we spent on freelancers. We thought, well, wouldn't this be easier if we just hired 2 people and we would be spending less, we'll keep more. And we did that, and actually it was more beneficial. We looked at the 12 months, how much money we spent on freelancers, and an average, looking at the last 3 years, average of the amount of work we get every year. And then we thought, let's just make the jump, and it was the right move, and we were able to have a bit more profit.
Yeah. How many times though do you have to remind yourself in that 1 year, it's going to be okay? Because you're freaking out that somebody's there and you're paying them and they have nothing to do. And you're thinking, I should just be a freelancer. I wouldn't be paying you right now. And you have to remind yourself, whoa. I did the math. Everything's okay. I'm looking down my sales pipeline. I'm looking at my total revenue. This matches. That's what we're looking for when we do the factors method. We're looking at that big picture annual spend and say, no, it's okay to have somebody at $80,000 a year on staff for all 12 months. They're only taking up 7% of the total revenue. And we can afford that 7%. That 7% in my 50% of direct costs, I'm barely even biting into that 50%. I can hire 5 more people before I go beyond that 50% mark. So yeah, that's great. And as you said, like once you have that person on staff, I should be able to do 2 projects at a time almost. When a freelancer, you onboard them, it takes so long to onboard them, you push them off. And then you're also missing the retained knowledge of how you work, how fast you can work, how fast they can read your mind. I can kick out 3 or 4 more things with someone on staff than I can a freelancer because that person is used to me. They're actually anticipating what I'm going to say. So will they fix problems before we get there? Those are all the really big benefits for staff. and why like just having all freelancer doesn't always work. Great. I see another thing popping up here, but I don't have enough time to read it. Anybody want to tell me what that says, or is that just for you all? And you just all reading it together. What do we have here?
I could go in depth, but my family's walking through the door, so it's going to be kind of loud here in a second. But
No worries.
long story
detail.
short is I built a sales rubric to help with that like faster decision making when it comes to like the questionable maybe / no projects. Links in there if anybody wants to have it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, share that with us at some point. We'd love to see it. Or you just posted it here.
It's in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it okay
This
with
actually-
you if I put that on community later on? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Th-
Appreciate you
this-
sharing that.
This actually kind of reminds me, I don't know if you've heard of this, but a guy I was talking to the other day was saying that they have like a juiciness scale to like quantify how cool the project is, and sort of like gamify a little bit what projects they take, and to kind of like realize, okay, we lost some money on this project, but it had some juiciness that we spent on it. So you can kind of like quantify how good the project is so that you can sort of equate that to the money that you're spending on it, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I like the name too. That's a very sticky name, isn't it? The whole like, yeah, you get what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Like that. You like that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I was answering somebody in the chat. Like, so it's interesting. A lot of people were talking about like, well, not doing or a loss because you just get that price again from the same client. And to a certain extent, I really agree. The loss projects that we tend to do or are things that are gambles that don't rely on that specific client. Like, for instance, the one loss project we've done this year was to get into a different vertical and to have paid work in a vertical that we hadn't been able to get into. So we took a loss, got into that vertical, and now we're able to market to others with that work. Another thing that, because we do a lot of VFX and a lot of animation, a lot of times we'll do a slight loss project to be able to use a new tool, something we had in the R&D, and we'll do it at a loss to get it out there. And then we can now peddle that and kind of show that to everybody and really kind of take it out for a drive.
Yeah. If I could, maybe I'll have to do the factors method next week so I can explain some of this. But inside of my factors, or that indirect category, is a expense I call calculated loss. It's in a way it's R&D. And you can spend that money on a project you know you're going to lose on, a person or research that you're going to do within something, or just you're going to pitch often and lose. So there's a calculated loss to running the business. Well, if you recognize the other projects, I'll have to pay for that. So that calculated loss becomes partly overhead, and that overhead has a burden to it. I want to put that in that category, and it gives me, I don't know, the feeling of permission to dive into that more, to say yes to that more frequently, to not feel so hesitant because I've baked that into my overhead costs. So I love that R&D category. That's a really good one, Andrew. Any last thoughts here? I know it's getting to about quarter till. Appreciate this conversation. I hope that you're kind of just grasping hold of like the next 6 months and what's possible for you. If the pace continues, it's not going to be the best year ever, but there is a lot of like juice to be squeezed out of this lemon. And if we can find the opportunities in every way and we're proactive, we can end up at the end of this year still with some profit. And some of you are going to find profit that you maybe didn't recognize before. Things like Remy's idea of like, maybe this is the right time to bring on the staff member. If you're looking at future estimated expenses anyway, let's find some efficiencies that way. What I really want you to do is recognize the cost that you have on these projects and the prices you put out there. I really want you to get those prices that you deserve. And if a client gives you a lower price, I don't want you to spend money more than the client gave you to make that project happen. We want to do as least amount as possible, because there's no real reason it doesn't really gain multiples. And good investments have multiples, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times. And we often think that we're investing in a project and we're getting like 1.5x from our return. That's not a good investment in any category. So I get there's, and I'm not going to argue with other reasons why we should say yes to projects or we do say yes to projects, but I just wanted you guys to be in the right space, measure them properly, and make those good decisions as we do it. And just a reminder, if any of you are kind of diving into this thing and you think that you want to take the foundations class, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to do a half-hour conversation with you. Some of these principles are really baked into a lot of the stuff we teach at RevThink. So I know some of you are new to community, new to this thinking, and I would help you kind of get a basis of running your business out there. It's an easy 6 weeks for that lesson, and it'll be kind of great, game changing for you. So happy to have you invited to that. That seems like it's it. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. I love the weekly briefing. Great things happening. Keep your eyes and ears open for next week. I think I might grab a few more of these topics that you guys brought up there and show you some more tools that we have. See if we can't solve some of your problems. Feel free to post the questions, post the solutions on community. I read those when I'm discovering a lot of the conversations to have here. I like to listen to you all and see what's going on. And I appreciate that you are loving and caring for each other. I see a lot of good support happening in community. So thanks for being there for one another. The community is stronger because of you guys are part of it. And until next week, you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week on the weekly briefing. Great to see all your faces. We'll see you then.
See you guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Of course. Later.